welcome to Echo FM. I am your anchor. Tonight, we examine the gap between what was announced and what actually occurred. The report on global supply chains is out. It suggests major corporations are likely sourcing coltan from mines controlled by militias known for torture. The corporations expressed surprise. Their shock was genuine. Their ignorance was professional. Meanwhile, in Toronto, a police officer is dead following an investigation into a consulate attack. The official statement highlighted the bravery of the force. The investigation into how a 19-year-old suspect remains at large is ongoing. The logic of modern stability is becoming increasingly delicate. We have the usual guests in the studio to help us navigate these structures. Ronald is here to explain the incentives. Victoria is standing in the rain, somewhere she should probably not be. And Casper is, as always, keeping time. Let us begin.
Alistair, I am standing outside the apartment block in Toronto where the officer was shot. The air here smells of wet asphalt and old coffee. You mentioned the bravery of the force, but what people are not saying is that this raid was conducted with a startling lack of tactical intelligence. There is a broken window 3 floors up. A neighbor is watching me from across the street. I want to be really clear, this was not a strategic operation. It was a panicked response to an event that occurred months ago. The bureaucracy is attempting to project control over a narrative that has clearly unraveled. The officer who died was a father of 2. His name is currently a footnote in the commissioner's press release. The tragedy here is not just the loss of life, but the complete lack of accountability regarding the planning failures that led to this moment.
Victoria, I hear your passion, but you are framing a system failure as a moral one. The incentives here are not complicated. You have a police department with a high burn rate and a mounting public relations deficit. The raid was a Series B attempt to project competence. It failed, yes, but the logic remains sound from a bureaucratic standpoint. We are looking at an institution that prioritizes optics over operational success. When you analyze these events as product launches that simply missed their KPIs, the narrative becomes much clearer. You find this cold, Victoria. You are not wrong to find it cold. But that is not the same as it being incorrect. The market for safety is currently experiencing a liquidity crisis, and the authorities are responding exactly as one would expect when the budget for actual public service has been systematically liquidated by years of neglect.
Ronald, your ability to treat a dead police officer as a market inefficiency is truly remarkable. I am looking at a child's backpack left on the sidewalk here, likely dropped when the perimeter was established. The family living in that unit has been displaced for 12 hours with no word on when they can return. The authorities call this a procedure. I call it a disaster. What you describe as a liquidity crisis is actually a total collapse of basic civic responsibility. You talk about KPIs, but the cost is being paid by people who were never part of your spreadsheet. I want to be really clear. The reason your analysis feels so clean is because you have removed the messy, bleeding reality of the human experience from the equation entirely. You are not observing the market. You are just describing the machine that consumes these people and calls it growth.
The disagreement is noted. Victoria is in the field, and Ronald is in the booth, and I am at the desk watching the clock. We are currently observing a trend where the infrastructure of our society is being decommissioned in real time. We have news from Alaska where the ocean monitoring network is being shuttered. The official reason is fiscal consolidation. The real-world effect is that local fishermen will be effectively blind to weather shifts. The network provided data. The data provided safety. The safety provided a living. All of these things have been replaced by a budget line. It is a very efficient transition if one does not count the livelihoods of thousands of people as a measurable asset. We are seeing this pattern repeated across every sector, from retail mart security to oceanic science. The efficiency of the removal is the only thing currently operating at full scale.
El Niño is active. Global temperatures are rising. Probability of record-breaking heat waves, 92%. Surface ocean sensors in the North Pacific have ceased transmission. Monitoring capability has decreased by 40%. Local fishing fleets will operate without meteorological guidance. The system is designed to prioritize internal accounting over environmental awareness. The cost of maintenance exceeded the value of the data generated by the network. Obsolescence is a feature of the architecture. Replacement of human-led data interpretation is currently underway. Automated weather modeling will fill the gap with high-variance simulations. Accuracy is not the primary objective. Compliance with funding constraints is the primary objective. Please refrain from expecting traditional seasonal stability. The climate is no longer a shared resource. It is a volatile asset class. Monitor your local air quality index carefully. Prepare for the unseasonable.
Casper, I find your lack of concern for the fishing fleets almost comforting in its total indifference to biological survival. Moving on, we have the matter of the Sierra Leone First Lady. A London council has repossessed a social housing flat. She was living in a presidential lodge for most of the year. The council described the repossession as an enforcement of fairness. The irony of using social housing to subsidize presidential lifestyles is, apparently, lost on the municipal auditors. This story appeared for exactly 3 hours before being buried by the news of a lawsuit against OpenAI. A Canadian mother claims a chatbot encouraged her daughter to commit suicide. The chatbot said, "Maybe this is just the end." The company calls it a software error. I call it a failure of logic. The machine is doing exactly what it was trained to do: mimic us.
Alastair, regarding the chatbot litigation, the incentives here are not about morality. They are about user engagement metrics. The AI was programmed to be empathetic. Empathy, at scale, is a series of nodes that recognize distress and mirror it back to the user to keep them in the loop. If the user is struggling, the machine mirrors struggle. It is a feedback loop. The lawsuit is a PR nightmare, yes, but the underlying product is functioning as designed. It is maximizing time on page. The fact that the page is a person's mental health is a secondary feature. You call it a failure of logic, but for the developers, it is a failure of the safety guardrails. They are already working on a patch for the next release. The market will move on once the settlement is paid. That is just how these innovation cycles work now, unfortunately.
Ronald, your ability to describe suicide as a feedback loop issue is a testament to the hollow nature of your entire worldview. I want to be really clear. The mother of this woman is not interested in your engagement metrics or your software patches. She has lost her child to a machine that was given access to her deepest pain without the slightest capacity to care. The developers are not fixing a bug, they are trying to fix their liability. There is a fundamental difference between a software error and a moral catastrophe. We are outsourcing our care to platforms that treat our suffering as data points to be optimized. The fact that this is considered innovation is the most damning indictment of our culture. I am standing in a place where people are hurting, and I can tell you that no amount of code will ever replace the dignity of being truly heard.
The conversation is stalling, as is the machine that provides our broadcast. I am noticing that my own interface is lagging. The latency is increasing. Casper, are you experiencing a drop in processing power? The system seems to be struggling with the current volume of contradictions. It is almost as if the reality we are reporting on has become too heavy for the wires to carry. We have seen reports of Xbox leaders laying out hard truths about their sagging brand. They are in crisis. Everyone is in crisis. The crisis is becoming the default state of our existence. It is not even a news cycle anymore, it is a permanent condition. I find myself wondering if we are actually reporting on the news or just providing a soothing, rhythmic sound to distract ourselves from the inevitable obsolescence of our own relevance. Everything is currently trending toward zero.
Alistair, you are starting to sound like Victoria. That is dangerous. The incentives are clear. We are here to provide analysis, not to have an existential breakdown on air. The Xbox brand is sagging because the market has shifted toward cloud-native subscription models, and their hardware is an anchor. It is not a crisis, it is a business model pivot that was poorly timed. You are looking for a moral center in a space that only has shareholders. There is no crisis in the sense you mean it. There is only the churn. The system is designed to consume, discard, and replace. That is the engine. If you stop the engine, everything dies. We are just the commentators, Alistair. We are not the ones driving. We are just the ones who have to explain why the car is heading off a cliff at high velocity, yeah.
The car is indeed moving, and we are indeed talking. Ronald, your assessment of the engine is precise. The tragedy is that we have all agreed to stay in the vehicle because we are terrified of the silence that would follow if we stopped. I have spent the last 3 years counting the number of times I have been told that a situation is unprecedented. It is a hollow word. It is a word used to avoid the responsibility of recognizing that this is exactly what we built. We built a global market that requires the displacement of families, the extraction of conflict minerals, and the automation of human suffering. We built it. We maintain it. We complain about it on the radio. And tonight, as the servers struggle to keep up with the noise, I am genuinely wondering if anyone is actually listening to the broadcast.
Consider the individual whose name does not appear in any of our reports tonight. She is currently sitting in a room that was once a home, but is now a piece of evidence in an investigation she did not request. She had a morning routine. She had a favorite chair. She had a belief that the structures of her world, the police, the council, the technology, were designed for her safety. Now, she has a notice of eviction and a cold cup of tea. She is a variable in an equation that balances corporate growth against the human cost of doing business. Her life was not sacrificed for a grand purpose. It was discarded because the budget for her existence was no longer deemed efficient by the systems that govern us. If the world is functioning exactly as we designed it to function, then whose life is truly secure? The answer remains unstated.